3, 2, 1. What is that sound? What is that sound?
What the crazy. I completely forgot I needed the plastic part. I'm gonna be attempting to flip a car until I can afford my dream bike. So I've been looking at a lot of motorcycles lately. They're not too expensive. I feel like flipping 2 cars or maybe a couple of cars would be enough to buy a dream bike. But I'm still a beginner, so I'm not trying to get like anything fancy. Just like a bike that I can learn on pretty much. Alright, so I know what you're probably thinking. How are we gonna do this? Well, this is a 2009 Toyota RAV4, which we got for a total of $1,500. Today I'll be showing you guys how to turn this neglected, dirty Toyota into thousands of dollars, and later on we'll see if we actually have enough for a bike or if we have to do another flip to actually get our dream bike. I'll be explaining in full details the issues we encountered along with the expenses and the overall profit that we made for only a few hours of work. With that said, let's get into the video. So when scrolling through Facebook, I stumbled upon this peculiar listing which really drew my attention. It showed a 2009 Toyota RAV4 priced at only $2,500. Now for those who are familiar with Toyota RAV4s, you will find this listing very suspicious because a Toyota of this age will most of the time be going for about $4,000 at least. When reading the description, it said clean title, runs and drives, check engine light is on, asking $2,500 or best offer. Immediately after reading this, I knew the price did not apply to me. When you see or best offer, you know the owner is willing to negotiate. I hopped on Kelley Blue Book and you can see here in good condition, this Toyota can go for as much as $6 grand. However, if we think about it realistically, we'll most likely be landing here around 5.5, which is still a good flip. All we need to do now is find reasons to negotiate the price down, and trust me, there's a lot of them. When looking at the pictures, I could already tell the car was in rough shape. The rims were cooked, the seats looked dirty, and the passenger side fender had a crazy dent, not to mention the bumper was all cracked. Now this wasn't a big deal to me since I knew we could repair both of these for fairly cheap. On the other hand, the rest of the paint looked to be in very good condition, and the only concern I had left was the check engine light. I asked the seller if he knew what the check engine light code was for, and he replied saying could be the O2 sensor. I also asked him what happened to the fender and bumper, which he just replied with cracked. At this point, I just realized it was just better to inspect the car myself, so we scheduled a time and I set out to see the car.
A few moments later.
So when I arrived at the seller's house, I realized the damage to the fender and bumper was way more severe than I thought. Now, while looking at the fender, I also noticed the passenger wheel was missing a lug nut. Now, upon closer inspection, I realized the stud which is used to screw in the nut was broken, which definitely explains the missing lug nut. So that needed to be replaced along with the driver's side tire. This tire was so bald, it was definitely the worst tire I've ever seen. It almost looked like one of those NASCAR tires. The interior was a complete mess. I wasn't sure if the seat could be cleaned, so I also assumed that needed to be replaced. When starting it sounded like the engine was having a heart attack. I'm not even kidding. Take a listen. Now, on top of that horrible bell squeak, you can also hear a different sound, almost like a mellow scream. I'm not really sure if you can hear it here, but honestly, this is really the only way I can describe it. The oil was whack, the brakes were whack, the coolant level was whack. Overall, the car needed some much needed TLC, which gave me the perfect opportunity to use Facebook's Old Reliable. I made him a lowball offer of $1,000, and you could probably guess what he said. Yeah, he said no. However, he did counter me at $2,000, so I pulled the oldest trick in the book and asked if he could meet me in the middle, to which he thought for a long time, but later agreed. So I bought the car for $1,500, plus another $200 to tow it home, and just like that, the car was now at my house.
The next day.
Now, after getting it home, I knew I had a big list to work with. I decided to tackle the mechanical issues first, starting with that check engine light. It threw a code for P0304, which means there's a misfire on cylinder 4. So a couple things that could cause this issue, including a faulty ignition coil, which basically takes voltage from the battery, sends it directly to the spark plug. The spark plug creates a spark, and then the cylinder fires. The coil is bad. There will be no voltage that generates spark, causing the whole cylinder not to fire, which is why we call it a misfire. Now, to test if it's the ignition coil, what you can do is switch the coil to a different cylinder. That way, if that cylinder starts to misfire, then you know it's definitely the coil. So that's exactly what I did. So I cleared the light and waited for the check engine light light to come back on. The check engine light did not come back on during my test drive, so while I waited, I decided to tackle my next issue, which was that horrible sound. I ordered a new belt on Rock Auto for about $9 to fix the squealing sound, but the monster sound was a bit trickier to diagnose. What I decided to do was to take the belt off and turn the engine on. This is really simple, but basically what this is going to do is spin the engine, but the rest of the pulleys will stay in place. This is because there's no belt moving them. If the noise is gone, then it's definitely one of the pulleys, so I turned the engine on and this is what happened. Now this is what it sounded like with the belt on. So now that we know it's a pulley issue, I will spin each of the pulleys manually with my hand and see if I can find the culprit. What the f? So not only was this pulley extremely noisy, there was some extreme wobble going on. You should never have this much play on a pulley, so I decided to take the bolts holding on the pulley only to find out that there's not enough space to dig it out. So after a little research and some chat GPTing, I realized the whole water pump which holds in the pulley needed to be taken off, which is not a big deal except the engine mount needs to be taken off, and the brackets, and the thermostat, and the coolant, and the tensioner, and the pulleys. So overall, a pretty hefty job. Fortunately, I found a couple of videos of people doing it, so my only job was to follow them step by step.
Hey guys, Chris Fix here, and today...
So step 1 is to drain the coolant.
Why is this so freaking tight, bro?
So next you take out the motor mount, then you take off this bracket. After that, take out this bracket. Next you take out the thermostat housing, then you take out the pulleys, and finally you take out the water pump.
So this is very important. So what I like doing is I like putting the bolts back where they actually came from, so that way there's no way for me to confuse them, which I already actually did.
So the next day I put everything back together, and the next step was to bleed the coolant. Everything looked good, and as you can see now, there's no more weird sounds, and the engine actually sounds like an engine now. My next issue was fixing this bumper and fender, and the first thing I realized was I needed to replace the fender entirely, since the clips that connected the fender were yeah, you know, cooked. So I found a bunch of listings on Facebook selling parts for RAV4s. Then I finally found one that actually had a fender, and let me just show you guys a little negotiation tactic I like doing. So basically what you do is when you arrive there, you tell them ahead of time that you're going in for a certain part. In this case, we're going in for a fender. Then tell them you'll give them more money if you can take other parts. For example, this fender was priced at $75, but when I got there, I told them I would give them $100 if I could also get a tire.
You want to be a mechanic?
No, I'm a videographer, so I'm just doing the videos for him.
Now, they would usually charge me $50 for this tire alone, but since I made it look like a bundle, I only paid $25. So moving on, every single rotor on this car was cooked, so all of them had to be replaced. Now, as you can see, while taking off the wheel, I kept breaking off studs, which usually happen when they get super rusty, so those also needed to be replaced. Luckily, they're not too expensive. You can get them at AutoZone for only $3 a piece. Now, I noticed while driving, the brake pedal felt a little bit too soft, so I decided to bleed every single brake line, starting with the farthest one away from the master cylinder. Just like that, we got all the brake issues addressed. Now moving on to the next part. Now a couple things I still gotta do, which include fixing this fender. As you can see, there's a pretty good dent on the side. The only reason why I got this is because a brand new one will cost you anywhere between $200 to $300. So instead of spending another fortune on a fender, I figured I would just fix it. Now when it comes to the bumper, I was considering buying a brand new one, but after watching a couple of videos, I figured I could probably fix it myself. Now what I'm planning on doing here is fixing the crack in the bumper, sanding it, painting it, and basically just making it look nice and shiny. Now on top of that, I still gotta detail this thing, but I'm gonna be doing this in the next video that's coming up, so stay tuned. But anyways, leave any comments on whether or not I'm doing things right or wrong. I've also flipped some other cars on my channel if you guys want to check those out, but for now on, I'll see you guys in part 2.